Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for being here for the first of a four-part series with the Sports Lawyers Association. My name is Aaron Hernandez. I'm the director of the Alan H. Budd Seelig Sports Law and Business Program at the Arizona State University College of Law, and I am very honored to be joined by our special guest today, from the Portland Trailblazers, their Senior Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Jennifer Hunter. Thank you so much for being here, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Aaron. So excited to be here and talk to your students today.
Jennifer, we're so excited to have you here as part of this SLA series. And the name of this episode of the four-part series is called Substantive Preparation for the SLA Conference, particularly addressing a lot of students who are attending their first SLA for the first time ever. And we think we got some great information from you coming their way. But first off, I want to know, Jennifer, how'd you get to such a cool position with such a cool organization? Give us some of your background. How'd you decide to become a sports lawyer?
Yeah, so true story. I thought that I was going to be the first woman to win the Heisman. I wanted to play football in, eighth grade. I was watching Michigan football, and Charles Woodson was playing both sides. He was, a wide receiver and a DB. And I just knew at 13 years old, like that was the career for me. I was going to be a professional athlete. I'm about 5'4", never really maxed out, got any taller. Tried out for my high school football team. Needless to say, that didn't occur. I'm not gonna jump into reasons why. Maybe today in a different time, I probably would have made the team, but they weren't letting too many women on back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So decided I wanted to be sport adjacent if I couldn't be on the field. And so I started my journey and love for sports and working at sports in high school. Had the opportunity to work for the New Orleans Saints, doing youth programs. I volunteered, called them up. Again, this is pre-Google days. I just called them on the phone and was like, hey, do y'all have some volunteer opportunities? They did. They let me stay at training camp, and that opened up the door for me to do so many things. So I knew that sport was what was for me, but I also always wanted to be a lawyer. And so just to be able to join and combine my love for sport and law, it just was a natural fit. So ended up, working for a couple of teams, NBA league office before I went to law school. Went to law school like most of you here today, did a sports law track, was really focused on, I'm going to be a sports agent when I come out. This is what I want to do. Last semester of law school, because you should all be curious, I decided to take a class on public education and policy in the United States. And it was not until my last semester of law school, I've gone through undergrad at Howard University in Washington, D.C., go through 3 years. I'm literally a 3L last semester. I take this class on public education policy, and I never recognized or even thought about the inequities that people experience in the education system, and that the trajectory that I was on was not because of my hard work and effort. It was mainly a combination of luck mixed with that hard work. But, my circumstances allowed me to be on a trajectory, but one little tweak in that, and I wouldn't have been able to do that. And so instead of becoming the sports agent, I decided to pursue public education and ended up working in college and college sports. And this has opened this door for me to do DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion work. Have spent time at the University of California, Cal Athletics, spent time at Wisconsin Athletics, went on to the Ivy League to work for Brown University and Brown Athletics. And now that has brought me full circle back to where I started in professional sports. And now I'm spearheading some efforts here at the Portland Trailblazers. So a real roundabout experience, crazy path. You never know where this world will take you. So just being open, I think, is a key piece for those trying to figure out their legal career, but great to be able to be in a position to make policy and change on the NBA level.
That's wonderful. And for all our viewers, she says 5'4", but what she fails to mention is a whole lot of fire and heart. So those boys back in the day are lucky that you weren't able to play on the team. They lucked out without you in practice. Jennifer, talk to me a little bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what sparked your passion in that specifically.
Yeah, so interesting again, kind of that intersection between sport and life. When I was at UC Berkeley, I was there. Fall 2014 was my first year on campus. Berkeley has about 38,000 students, and at that time, there were approximately 364 Black males on a campus of 38,000. Out of that 364, 60% of that was student athlete, which meant that I knew the bulk of Black males on UC Berkeley's campus. And so that is such a unique experience for student athletes. It's a struggle. It is a time for people where they feel like they're isolated, they're alone, and they're away from home. And so that opened up the door, and that was right at the cusp of the start of the Black Lives Matter movement. And so for me, it was like, how do you allow and give students the experience to really, you're at Berkeley, you're at one of the greatest institutions in the world, even though I know, this is Pac-12 versus Pac-12. I've been to Arizona State many times with that little curtain of what's that curtain that y'all pull at the basketball games?
Distraction, curtain of distraction.
Yes. I've witnessed that and laughed many, many times with my travels with the basketball team. But from an education standpoint, when you're in college, this is the part that's supposed to develop you. And so to watch some of those struggles, I knew that I needed to do more than just provide the academic experience, but also preparing not only our student athletes, but the people that are interacting with them to make environments that are equitable and an environment where everyone feels welcomed. And so that is actually what kind of opened my door to walking into doing this diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And so from there, went to University of Wisconsin and actually started an official program, a DEI department within Wisconsin athletics. And it, big learning curve, going from a super ultra, liberal environment like a Berkeley to Wisconsin. It's different, right? So you have to kind of make those adjustments, which are great. But that's part of the equity work, right? Like everybody's not super liberal. We have, I've come from a very conservative family. And so my job is to kind of bring all of those pieces to the table where we can all live in our values and the things that are important to us, but in a way in which this environment feels welcoming for all without me having to sacrifice who I am. And so that's kind of if there was a theory or a philosophy around the work that I do, like that's kind of that key piece of how to be equitable and be true to yourself at the same time.
Well, Jennifer, that's wonderful. And it's a perfect segue into the topic that we're discussing today, which is substantive preparation for this conference. There's a lot of students, again, this is their first foray into professional networking and going to a big conference like this. And a lot of them come from backgrounds where they just don't have institutional knowledge in their families to lean on. And luckily, they're going to have this video of you imparting your wisdom. So first off, for these folks who are attending their first SLA conference, what are some current events and issues that you would advise them to be brushed up on in preparation for this conference?
Wow. I mean, right now there's, so much going on in the world. I mean, I feel like every week it's something new, even, particularly from a sports standpoint. I mean, obviously, if we start at the top, Supreme Court, man, they may not always be right, but guess what? It's law. And so, I think us looking at the Alston case and what the ramifications and the outcome of that's going to be has the potential to change collegiate athletics as we know it, the entire system. And so I think really from the sports standpoint, particularly if you're interested in collegiate sport, really thinking about what that's going to do. How does that impact the financial model? How does that impact how, if you know anything about collegiate sport, that kind of Power Five group generates the bulk of the money that allows it to trickle down in order for Division II and Division III to really operate. And so if this case changes the way in which that money is disseminated, how does Division II and Division III even survive, right? So really thinking through and just looking at what that can be and staying abreast of what's been discussed. Because just right now, it's not looking very pretty for the NCAA. The legal strategy that they have brought in, everything from looking at how students of color are tracked in their majors. I mean, they are bringing everything possible against collegiate sport right now. So that's definitely one thing I would be aware of. From a professional level, one of the things we're keeping our eye on. I live in Oregon, so, we don't have these issues too much here, but a lot of these anti-trans bills and some of the I'm not going to say voter restriction, new emerging voter bills that seem to people to be very restrictive. I'm not going to put my opinion on that. You have a lot of players that are standing up for social justice and for what they perceive to be right. So this push by professional organizations and by athletes to remove, games. We saw what happened in Atlanta with the All-Star game. We saw the NCAA, put out something about not, hosting events in places with anti-trans bills in place. And so, when you're thinking about where you're working, every place that you boycott and decide not to host an event, that's money that's coming out of that economy, that local economy. And you have fans that may walk away, right? So, these are things, at least from professional sports, like we get pushed a lot to make a statement and make a stand on things. Look at a lot of the anti-Asian violence that's going on as well. That I'm not going to say pressure. The right thing to do is for organizations to stand up and make sure that they're supporting. But then there's always those pieces of sports should not, integrate with politics. But what I try to impress upon people is like behind the ball, off the field, like these are men and women that are people, and these things impact them. And so those are things we're looking at. The new gambling laws, a lot of states and sports gambling, like that's going to be a big issue. Also, just leagues making sure that their employees, that their players are doing the right thing and that they're not being pressured to throw games, et cetera. So that's something on the horizon. Post-COVID data collection. You have some states, in California right now, in order for you to go to an in-arena event, you're going to have to produce a COVID test, right? And so when we're talking about the data collection component, like these are all new spaces for fans of like, do I feel like I should give, the Warriors a copy of my most recent COVID test or my vaccination card or whatever, right? And so, legally, how much can an organization hold and carry of their patrons or even ask, right? And so that's a new space. We have very few organizations have been into personal data collection to that level. So it'll be really interesting to see where these things go. But I would say those are a few things. And obviously name, image, and likeness, back to, that's going to be a really big piece for us to really kind of pay attention to. And I believe Arizona may have just put out some legislation or put something up to, get voted on. So even in your own backyard, like that's coming down the pipeline. So just kind of pay attention to those things.
That's great. Jennifer Hunter, Senior Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Portland Trailblazers. Given your expertise, Jennifer, this will lead into my next question. I think part of people's first conference and being substantively prepared for it is the finer points of diversity, equity, and inclusion and how they can bake that into their networking and how they prepare to interact with other people. And I don't expect you to give them direct advice on that right now, but it does lead into a question about what they should be read up on. So you gave a great overview of some legal issues, but what are some media that participants should be reading ahead of time of the conference to get the most that they absolutely can get out of it, substantively from a legal perspective, but also I'd like to hear your DEI perspective. What's a quick cheat sheet that they could take in with them to prepare them for a conference like this?
Your 1Ls are watching this, like, read something outside of school. When do I have the time? So realistically, always Sports Business Journal, get a subscription, 100% worth, knowing what's going on in the world. And that is really what's leading in sport. It boils down to the money. We can say whatever we want to, but everybody's looking for ROI. So you need to understand all of these components that are potentially impacting the money and how it's impacting organizations, leagues, and the things that they're trying to do. Moving from collegiate sport back into the pros has really opened my eyes about how much sport really is pressured to lead and innovate in spaces, whether it's from, climate. We have this new climate change arena that's taking place in Seattle, and that arena is going to be the prototype of a very sustainable arena, right? We see these arenas with 100, look at Dallas, and you have this 100-foot. I feel like you're a Cowboys fan, aren't you?
Guilty.
So, Cowboy Stadium has this huge 100-foot something crazy like, TV or whatever screen. But like from a sustainability standpoint, don't want to know what the electric bill is on that. But you have these arenas that are being pressured to do like the opposite, to give the experience, but also like, sustainability. And so when we think about those things cost money, that's investments. Those are policies. Certain states are requiring new buildings, particularly if they're publicly funded, to have a lot of sustainability components, right? So as lawyers, like these are things that you are in conversations with if you're in government affairs. You have to be abreast of these legalities and these state requirements, and you have to live up to them. ADA, like all of these components. So a lot of different things that you can read, but Sports Business Journal will always keep you abreast of that. I am going to actually answer your previous question in a second because I do have some advice on that. But the other thing, I love to read The Athletic. I think it's a good mix of real life stories and kind of that humanization of athletes and of across places. Also, Players Tribune. Like these are things that I like to read to just get in the mindset of what's going on. In terms of DEI at a conference, here's going to be a real conversation. People are very comfortable with, I'm Black, I'm going to talk to that Black guy over there. I'm Latinx, Hispanic, I'm going to go talk to, who looks like me. You have to have diversity of your network. And that's for everybody of every ethnicity. I am 100% guilty of going straight to the women in the room, 100% guilty of it. And I've had to really grow. I mean, I'm a woman in sport. Totally different conversation, but some women are still kind of uncomfortable in that space to go up to men. So men making sure that you are welcoming women into the space and women feeling comfortable to be in those environments as well. And also mix up the ethnicities and talk to people. People fall into their comfort zones very easily. So from a DEI standpoint, have a diverse network. That diversity is super strong. You can grow, you can learn from anyone. So I think that that's a key piece. So I did want to actually answer that from a DEI perspective.
Getting out of your comfort zone, that's how you grow. And that I think that's absolutely wonderful advice, Jennifer. We're coming towards the end of our time here. And I wanted to ask you, what's some general advice and some parting advice that you would give to a first-time participant going to this conference? And maybe what are some lessons you learned from your first time doing one of these things in the not so distant past?
It's very distant because I'm getting up there in age. I think the biggest thing for me, one, like somebody gave me this advice and it is something that I've taken with me everywhere. Know a little bit about everything. When you know a little bit about everything, you feel comfortable in every space. So it's a rare occasion that I walk into a room and there's a conversation going on that I'm not, we could be talking about Chopin. I will be right there like, all right, here we are. You need to be comfortable with everything. And so the best way, as we talked about, start to research what's going on. Start to know, what the people that, there are some people that you want to talk to. Like there is somebody I know is going to be in the space. I need to talk to them. Make sure that you know their research, make sure you know their writings, make sure you know those pieces. But go into it not trying to prove that you are just as knowledgeable, but going in with that humility of learning from them and going to soak up that knowledge, right? So that it's just kind of that mutual, you're showing that respect without being like a know-it-all. I think our tendency, particularly as lawyers, we want to be the top dog in the room every time. So I just think that having a little bit of humility, researching your people, knowing folks, knowing, what their backgrounds are, like those are some critical pieces. Making sure you're going in to try to make a diverse network. And the biggest thing, follow up. We send that one email and then like you get one response and then you're like, okay, we'll do some check-ins, and then you never check in. And in law school, it's even harder because of the little bit of time that you have. But in that, make sure that you do that. Like try to follow up, try to get some mentors, gain those people that are really just going to help you through this experience, and people that help you see the light at the end of the tunnel. That's a 1L for my 1L's hardest year. It's actually your 2L year is the hardest year, but it feels like the hardest year is your 1L year. And you just need people that are going to be able to kind of guide you through this process and make it feel good. And you can find that at this conference. So be on the lookout.
Jennifer Hunter, Senior Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Portland Trailblazers. Jennifer, thank you so much for being here with us today. Your positivity comes through the screen. I'm sure there's a lot of 1L, 2Ls, and 3Ls who have a dark cloud of law school hanging over them that they're energized by you today. So I just wanted to thank you for joining SLA on this episode of this series. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. Good luck, everyone.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us. We look forward to you joining us for our next episode. Episode 2 will be with Marla Axelrod from the Philadelphia Eagles, and it'll be preparing for your first encounter at the conference. Thank you, everybody.